I hope everyone can see the presentation. So I'll be kind of going through that. So just let me know if there are any issues with that. Also, let me know if I start to talk too fast. I know it's my, I have a tendency to do that. I get, especially when I get, kind of excited about what I'm talking about. There is a lot I want to say, so kind of end up speaking fast. Um, so yeah, just kind of I'll talk to you a little bit about my experiences from, I guess more than like I've been at Google for 12 and a half years, and a little bit of kind of what's been happening with me lately. So just a super brief outline. Just kind of I'll tell you a little bit around how my career has gone so far. I want to do a full long journey, but that just kind of that will frame kind of what we're talking about later. And then I have kind of five different lessons in the sense of these may not quite be lessons for you, but they have been big lessons for me. And I think some of them, will probably come pretty naturally to you, and you'll be like, wait, how come you needed to learn this, through experience? And some of them might be interesting stories for you. I certainly hope that some of them will be interesting. But I do hope it's kind of just an interesting. I always enjoy hearing someone else's journey. So I'm hoping some of this will be useful, and then we'll have plenty of time in the end to do questions and answers. So just before I start, these are a couple of caveats, I guess, kind of more generic stuff, where I do really think it's important to frame discussions like this by saying that we all have different career journeys. And again, the reason I enjoy hearing different people's is because they're also different, and I feel kind of every time I learn a little bit of something. um, Mine in particular, that's something that I'm quite mindful of, and something that has been actually shaping kind of some of my thinking in the last year or two, is that I feel my journey has been very linear. Kind of I've stayed in one company for pretty much my entire professional career so far. I've stayed in similar role in the sense that I was an engineer and then moved to engineering leadership, kind of management and so on. So I think many people do things much differently. Like they try out a lot of different roles, they change companies a lot. Like neither one of these paths is right or wrong or better or worse. Like if anything, maybe actually the path that gives you like a lot of diversity of experience is actually more kind of interesting, and a kind of the right investment in the long run. I just wanted to frame that. Like I think if you look at my journey, sometimes I hear from people are like, oh wow, you've just shot up, and it was just kind of only kind of on the way up for you. But I really don't want to frame that as like, oh, that's like the best way to do your career at all. Like as a matter of fact, I do have some regrets about maybe not experimenting with a few different things when I was more junior, when it was a little bit easier to do something like that. So just I think that's important to frame early on. And then again, as I said, like I think some of these lessons that I had to learn, some of them harder way, may not be relevant for you. Maybe some of these things come naturally, but I certainly hope that at least some of these will be kind of interesting stories or something that you can hopefully learn from. Okay, so with that, just kind of to give you, and by the way, I genuinely also don't mind being interrupted at any point. So if you have a like a quick question related to something that I'm talking about at that point, feel free to stop me and just interrupt me, and kind of I can answer right on the go, and then we will have time in the end as well. Um, so just again, a brief outline of my career. I won't walk you through all of this. It was super interesting experience actually putting this timeline together. I've never done it before. There was never really like I've done a lot of these career talks, but I never really sat down and put this in such a structured and graphical way. And I thought it was really interesting. So it's kind of I think for those of you who've been doing who have been in industry maybe for kind of 5 or 6 or 10 years, I do recommend doing something like this because it's very I think it just reminds you of the journey. I think it frames everything, and it just kind of sometimes it reminds you just how much happened and how much you've done and accomplished, which can be pretty, it can be motivating. It can be kind of uplifting and nice. So just kind of my experience putting this together was sort of like, it was a bit painful to remember everything, but it's just kind of in the end I was like I was so super happy I've done it. Um, So just very briefly, I started as an intern at Google back in 2007, ages ago, and then I joined as a new grad software engineer in 2008. I worked initially on some infrastructural stuff, and then I moved on to work on search in 2010. So I'll talk more about that in one of my first stories. Sorry, that was meant to be 2009. I got promoted for the first time in 2010, so about a year and a half or 2 years in after I joined. Then I moved to work on Android in 2011. And I started on Google Play, which was sort of also part of that kind of Android journey, or specifically the Play Developer Experience in 2012. And that was also the same year I was promoted to senior software engineer. I started tech leading, other people or kind of other engineers, roughly 2013 at some point. I got promoted to staff software engineer in 2014, and that was the time when I moved to management. So about maybe 6 years into my professional career, started managing people. I over the next year or so, I grew my team from 10 to 20 and started managing managers. So kind of added that structure kind of under me and started doing that. Then kind of adopted some of the peer teams in 2016 and got promoted to senior engineering manager. Then kind of doubled the org some more throughout 2017 and 2018. And in 2018, I was promoted to engineering director. And later that year, I picked up site leadership for Google Play in London, kind of in late 2018, if I remember correctly. And then kind of also grew the org some more throughout 2019 and 2020. I was out on maternity leave throughout 2024, maybe 5 or 6 months, something like that. And now this is actually my last week at Google after 12 and a bit years, almost 13 years. And I'm joining a company called Trainline as their CTO. So I'll be running their tech organization. So it's kind of, as you can imagine, it's a pretty big change for me. And also, I guess, the reason why I have time to do talks like this and kind of a few other things is just because I'm just wrapping up my stuff at Google, and before I start this new job, I figured like it's kind of now is a good time to connect with some people and do some stuff like that. So that's roughly how the journey looked. Just kind of it's not a it's obviously not relevant remembering kind of anything specific here, just kind of to frame the whole thing, and then I'll be talking about individual and generally some of my biggest lessons were obviously positioned somewhere on this timeline, so kind of I'll be referring to that, so kind of might help you kind of frame the story a little bit. So my first lesson, and sorry, these slides are very there isn't much content on it, so it's kind of if you are considering whether to keep that pinned or me talking, kind of maybe me talking is a little bit more relevant, but just kind of to illustrate this. So one of my first lessons was that you don't really know what you like, and I don't know if this is obvious to people or not. It was not obvious to me at all because I think I tend to be kind of opinionated person. I tend to like think I know what I want and what I like and what I don't like and kind of all that. But what I realized was initially when I joined Google, I ended up on infrastructural team, on a team effectively that was taking care of large scale serving in production of some services that kind of we were running for Google at that stage. So that type of stuff was completely new to me. Like I didn't, kind of coming out of university with a generally very algorithmical background, coding competitions and that type of stuff. Um, I didn't know anything about running services in production, especially at Google scale, or kind of, how all of that looks and works. So when I ended up, I got slotted into that team without much input, kind of that's how it used to work in those days. And I wasn't super, I was like, okay, I'm not sure about this, like I'm not sure I'm gonna love this, like I just don't know. This doesn't seem like something I was expecting. I thought I'll join Google and I'll work on some really cool algorithms, and it's kind of like I think that's just what I expected. So then I decided obviously to give this a chance. I don't think I even had much choice. So I started looking into it, and like within first 2 weeks, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like I'm learning so much. This is just this completely new universe of, how you actually do software at high scale, in kind of production for real users, for, hundreds of millions at that time, or if not, billions of users. So just so many new things to learn. It was amazing. So it's basically, if you asked me before that if this would be something that I like and enjoy, I would never ever say. I would be like, I don't even understand what you're talking about, what it is. But it was fantastic, and I really really enjoyed it and learned so much. And it was just kind of, it was my first kind of hint towards this kind of like, hey, you don't actually always know what you're gonna like. But smart person would have learned that from that first lesson. I didn't. So a year or so in, I got a chance to work on search, so on Google search, specifically on search quality, which for me was a dream come true. For me, that was like, oh my God, like I kind of joined Google to work on search. This is exactly the type of stuff I hoped. This is exactly what I expected. I'll get to like now finally write these smart algorithms and do all this smart stuff, and this is what I love. So rewind a little bit, year and a bit in on search, and I was like, okay, I think I'm done with this. I don't want to do this, or I won't do anything similar like ever, I think, or like not for a very long time. And the reality is that like I think I figured that actually day to day of that job of being, search quality engineer, or engineer on search quality, was way less glamorous than what I expected. I thought that I'll be designing and writing all these cool algorithms for ranking and whatnot. But actually already at that stage, search was a very mature product and certainly mature set of technical systems. So the kind of difference you were making at that time as a still kind of more junior engineer, I was, and this is actually fairly typical for the technical system, for like products really, which are based on quality. So it was similar with any sort of recommendations or abuse or anything like that. So kind of the day-to-day reality of the job is that you're bringing in new data signals. You are kind of crunching those in a fairly standardized way with the other signals, and you are then running a bunch of experiments, analyzing those experiments. And if you're lucky, those experiments go well and you're not going to move the metrics. You may have moved some of the key metrics by 0.02% or something kind of very small. So it was just, it felt to me it was way less like less meaningful than I thought. It just kind of felt a bit more, just kind of the day-to-day mechanics of it were not as fun as I thought. And then the end impact was just like moving this very important metric, but just by tiny bit, kind of, and it just wasn't kind of quite as, fulfilling as I thought. So again, that was my second time to hear this lesson that, just kind of, hey, you don't actually know what you're gonna like until you try it. Like, and I've got it in both of them. So like by this time I really should have internalized it, and yet I still didn't. So anyway, I left search. I joined Android. I really enjoyed that. At that time, Android was really taking on, and or taking off rather, and starting to do well. And I was like creating so much and making a lot of difference. I was really excited about it. And then at some point in London, we decided to specialize, the Android team, on developer experience for developers publishing apps on Google Play and building apps for Android. And again, like I was kind of like, oh no, but I'm a kind of consumer person. I want to build consumer services and products. Like I want to build something that my mom can use and understand, and I want to be able to brag about it to my friends and whatnot. And kind of I was like, I don't want to build products for other businesses. That didn't sound like, I don't think I can get excited about that. There is nothing cool. So again, I was this sort of like, remember speaking to my manager and saying like, I don't want to do this. Like, I think I'm just going to move to another team at Google. I'm just kind of not excited about this, the. And he just told me like, just give it a chance. Give it a chance for a couple of months. If you still don't like it, you can always move, but kind of like, just try it out. And I did. And then I stayed in that developer experience team until this day. Like I'm leaving. This is still kind of like right now I run that. I've been over the last couple of years, I've been the engineering director in charge of, developer experience for Google Play. So overall I've stayed in that area for, I don't know, maybe close to 10 years or something like that. And I absolutely love it. And I think it's the most amazing domain that anyone can work in. And I get so much joy out of building software for other companies, for other businesses, and helping them succeed and kind of all that. So I think that was really, after that third instance was, it's kind of, as you can tell I'm not the smartest. I can be a little bit thick and, like I need to learn the lesson multiple times. But after that third time, it really clicked on me. And I was like, wow, okay, it looks like I have no clue what I actually enjoy. So just sometimes you have to give it a try, have to give it. So anyway, that's my, kind of to summarize all of that, that's a very long story short. You don't always know what you're gonna like and what you won't like at all. You might have a completely wrong perception. So I think it's worth giving different things a chance, and just don't be initially resistant or like overly opinionated around the type of work you're taking on. Like sometimes, the work might surprise you, and you might surprise yourself in terms of where you find joy and what works. Okay, cool. So that's the first lesson. I think I may need to move a little bit faster because I worry that I'm kind of being a bit slow with this. So my second lesson was initially when I so first I've been rejecting, like I didn't want to move to management, like because I really loved my job as a software engineer. I just loved writing code. I absolutely love designing systems, working with others. So we build stuff together, like all of that was fine. But just, I loved coding, I love designing systems, and I loved working with others, either as a tech lead or even just as an individual contributor. I didn't want to move into people management because that, I don't know, it just didn't feel like, it felt like I was like, oh, I'm just going to be doing meetings and other things. Like I feel I won't be getting this joy out of creating stuff and building stuff that I get so much joy out of. Uh, and then at some stage, our team was growing so much, and I saw a couple of managers come in externally and struggle a little bit, and don't do very well, and then the team is not super happy and kind of didn't go very well. And I was like looking how that's going, and I was like, "Oof, actually, I do think I could do this job, you know, better than these other guys, or certainly well. So like I think I want to maybe this time I give this a shot." And again, like I took my own advice, sort of like, okay, maybe I don't like it, but what do I know? Like I was so wrong about this so many times. So like, I'll give this a shot. If I don't like it, that's fine. I can always go back to being an engineer. But it maybe, it's just kind of, maybe I finally, my boss has been trying to get me to manage people for a while, so let's give this a shot. So I did, and surprise, surprise, it turned out that I actually enjoyed it quite a lot, and like specifically, like I introspected a lot on like what I liked about being software engineer, and what I liked about being a an engineering manager, and how those are different and kind of the same. So the this joy of, if you get joy from building stuff, still as a manager you can get that joy by, if you really think that, kind of, hey, now everything your team builds, if they're really empowered, if they're successful, if they do well, you get to feel that joy as well, right? Like, because yes, I'm not writing code myself, but whatever my team builds, whatever my team ships and lands, and kind of all that, like that's also my achievement in some sense. So that was kind of, I still got to keep that joy and pleasure, and that was fantastic. I got yeah. So it's kind of like, the other thing is, I realized that I get really happy by seeing happy engineers. So people around me being happy and satisfied in their job, learning new things, growing a lot, kind of all that. I realized that that brings me personally a lot of joy as well. So that was something that I was getting a little bit of that as an individual contributor, maybe when I mentor someone, more junior or something like that. But as a manager, that's kind of the core of your job. And this is actually, this lesson was is precisely about that. It's like realizing that sometimes, even when you just like climb the ladder, the job actually changes, and you really need to think about what is the point of a job at any given point. So it's kind of, when you're a junior engineer, your job is pretty much just to kind of to write the code. It's to understand what code you need to write. It's a little bit maybe to collaborate at the edges, but for the most part, your goal is to write as much code as possible. Almost, I'm trivializing because it's not just about the lines of code, obviously, but it's like that's the core of your job. As you get a little bit more senior as an engineer, your job becomes more and more about the leadership. So it's like thinking about the bigger picture. Are we building, is like technology solving the problem we're being asked to solve? It becomes more and more about collaboration with others, because now you can't do the work just yourself. You need to collaborate with others, and you need to kind of make sure that teamwork works, and kind of that everyone is writing the code that needs to be written and all that. And then when you move into people management, it's just a different job, right? Like it's kind of, you day to day is absolutely not to write any code. Like it's kind of I remember thinking, oh, this team that I was taking on when I was about to start managing, I was like, this team is not in a good shape. I think people are not quite happy. They're not optimizing. They're not delivering stuff very well, and kind of all that. But the kind of I ended up. I was like, I think it's going to take me a couple of months to fix this. I'm just going to set everything up, talk to everyone, assign the roles, like get kind of a good project roadmap lined up, kind of all that. And after I do that, I'll go back to coding a little bit, like at least 50%. I never went back to coding. There was never time because there was always a new organizational challenge. There was always a new people, like a personal challenge or something like that on the team that needed to be fixed. And I think just that distinction is important to realize. Like it's important to realize that management is not just something you chuck on top of your engineering role and do it in a 10 or 20% capacity. It's a full-time job on its own, and you need to take it seriously. You need to like it for what it is, for enjoying making people happy, making people productive, getting people to grow, and obviously getting teams delivering kind of the business value that they're meant to be creating. So that's I think that was one of my kind of my second biggest lesson, was just really understand what your job is at each stage of your career, or wherever you are, and then kind of focus on what that job is. And especially like specific instance of that is that, like, software engineer job is not the same as engineering manager job. The engineering manager is not a superset or any other way around. It's kind of like they're different jobs, and I think that that's very much important to keep in mind. Cool. Okay, second lesson. Lesson number three. Let me remember which this one. All right, resilience. So I used to take things way more dramatically when I was, at earlier stages of my career, when I was a bit more. Sorry, did anyone want to ask a question, or no? Maybe not. Maybe someone just unmuted a little bit on an accident. Yeah. Feel free to stop me at any point if you want. Um, so kind of, yeah, I used to take things way more dramatically, in the sense that I don't know, I was always sort of like, oh, it's like this person drives me crazy and I don't understand what they're doing, and God, I can't stand this guy, and he's really like in my way, and I'm just trying to get stuff done, and he's like, they're always, it's kind of, and I was taking these things dramatically to the point where I was kind of like, this person drives me crazy. I can't work anymore like this. I'm not set up to succeed here. I'm gonna quit. Or either like I'm gonna quit and move to a different team within Google, or I'm gonna quit Google and go somewhere else, or just kind of. And yeah, it took like a lot of introspection and kind of all that to move away from that place, just to take things with a little bit more perspective, and be a little bit more resilient to those day-to-day things that irritate you, and just kind of try to like not to let them get to me to the point where I'm like, I'm gonna quit about this. And there is a specific story that I feel was like a really big clicking moment for me in this sense. And that was, there was a really large project that my team was being asked to. So let's say my team was maybe 20 people at that stage, and we were super busy and super overbooked, which I know every team feels that way all the time. We like I've never met a team who are like, oh yeah, we kind of don't have stuff to do. Everyone feels like they have too much work at any point. However, I think we really did have like an awful lot. Like I think we were effectively, that team then grew to be like 60 or 70, and when we were 20, you can imagine there was just way too much stuff to do. So in that, it's kind of, we're super busy, we're overstretched, everyone is asking us for stuff, and we're just kind of like, barely swimming to trying to keep people satisfied. And this idea of a really big project shows up, and some senior people become very excited about it and start kind of advocating for it. Um, and kind of, I'm very resistive to the project, thinking that that project would be super disruptive to everything my teams are doing, in the sense that we would have to build majority of it. So I would, out of my 20 people, I would have to put 10 on that project is like a very long term thing. So it's going to take, let's say, 3 years at best for us to start to see some, to like 2 years to launch it, and then maybe 3 years to see impact. And while we do that, it's also very intrusive technical change. So it just kind of is going to be effectively rigging through our stack in a very, very drastic way, which is going to slow us down in terms of everything else. And then I was worried, like, what's this going to mean for career development for people? Like, will anyone be able to be promoted in the next 3 years? Will I be able to be promoted in the next? It's kind of like all of these things are crossing my mind, and I'm just kind of like, no, like everyone is excited about the big future vision of this project, but I think no one is actually, people are just not realistic in terms of what this means for everyone. Like everyone is just kind of glossing over this huge complexity and huge amount of work that needs to happen, mainly on my team, for this to become a reality. So kind of I try to make this point with various different leads, with all of these senior people. I just feel that I'm not being heard. It's kind of, I keep saying these things, and they say like, why are you complaining about, why are you trying to stop this, we don't understand. It's just that somehow we're not speaking the same language. Like I really try. It's kind of, obviously I probably was also doing a great job communicating my issues related to it. But just kind of, it just felt like we are speaking completely different languages and people don't get me. And at some point, having at that point been much less resilient than I am right now, I'm like, no, I can't handle this. This is nonsense. In this way, I'm not set up to succeed. I'm gonna quit. I don't want to put my team in a position where we're set up to fail. So I'm just not going to do this. So we have this really big executive review with multiple VPs, and VPs are senior at Google, for those of you who don't know, who are, so you're kind of reviewing what's going to, so it's effectively go or no go for this big project. And various people are presenting, and it's kind of like the sentiment in the room is general sentiment of excitement. This is the right kind of path going forward. So just kind of at one point, one of the most senior guys in the room asks like, okay, so it sounds like this is looking good, so just kind of, does anyone have issues with this? And I'm like, what should I do? Like, do I say something? And one of my peers encourages me. He says like, no, no, you should say, like, you should speak up. You should speak up and say what are your grudges, with regards to this. So I, stand up in this big room, kind of in front of these people, and at that point, I'm already kind of like, hey, I don't care, I'm quitting, so might as well speak up the truth to the power. It's just kind of, that's it. Like, I don't care. So I speak up and I say like, listen, I don't think this is a good idea. I think this is super intrusive. I think you're all underestimating how hard this will be, and it's hard for this reason and that reason and that reason. It's gonna be like too much work. It's gonna take too long. It brings these risks. It's kind of like all of these challenges. And I say like, basically, I don't think we should be doing this. um and the guy, or rather, two VPs, were just kind of look at themselves and they say like, okay, like what you're saying actually makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for the honesty. Like, we were looking for someone to actually realistically assess this and say this. What you're saying makes a lot of sense. How would you feel if you get additional 20 people to work on this, so you can continue doing whatever you were doing so far, but you can also work on this in parallel and kind of go forward with it. And I kind of look and I'm like, okay, I guess if we do it that way, then I think I'm more comfortable for sure. Like, there's still risk, it's still long term, and you need to be patient. And I don't want, like a year down the line, someone coming and saying, why is this not shipped already, or kind of something like that. But with extra people, I think this is something we can take on, and then it's kind of much more realistic. Um, and yeah, and that's how it happened. It's kind of, we got like a huge amount of headcount for it. I grew the team. We started gradually, we took our time, we did it the right way. We ended up shipping it exactly, maybe year and a half, 2 years in. And then 3 years in, it was really starting to bear fruit, and to look good, and kind of all that. So that was, I don't know, like, I feel that was the ticking point for me. And that was by far not the only example. As I've said, like, I can be a bit thick, and it takes me multiple times to really learn a lesson. But I feel that was really the tipping point of an event where I realized, like, I'm like, God, I'm taking some of this stuff way more seriously. Why did I think that I need to quit over this? I mean, it's nonsense. Like, I just needed to speak up and like tell people what's actually happening here. And people are reasonable and they're smart. And they're not always reasonable, smart. But let's say, if you work in a good place, for the majority of cases, people will be reasonable and smart. And if you speak in, if you know what you're talking about, and you speak truth to the power and kind of all that, it'll generally work out pretty well. And and even if it doesn't, like, I think there is just no reason for drama and for being so upset with yourself, with anyone, with kind of so I think I've learned this skill of resilience, and just like not letting that type of stuff get to you in such a dramatic way that you are, that it's just affecting your well-being, that you're stressed, that you're unhappy, that you think that you need to quit, that kind of like all those things. I think it's incredibly important to learn. So just putting things in perspective, and kind of being more resilient. Like, I think for me it was really life changing, kind of both professionally, but also I think personally, I think it helped me a lot. Okay, lesson number 4. What was this one? Oh damn, sorry, I have to remember this. Like, oh yes. so sort of related to this, and by the way, all of these are kind of sequential. Like I think I'm talking to you about like how I was picking up these lessons throughout my career as I was getting more senior. um I think it's some like Google is very, very large, and I don't know, kind of where, the people who are attending where you all work. The likelihood is some of you might work in big tech, many of you probably work in smaller companies, so this might not be as much of an issue. Although I do think it is our tendency as people for stuff to happen this way. But I basically kind of at some point I really started identifying myself with my team, in the sense that like I felt my mission as a manager was to work in the interest of my team the best I can. And I think that is correct, and it's a good attitude, and it's why I always had like high manager scores, and people were happy, and staying on my teams for a long time and all that. But at some point I realized that actually I'm losing a bit of perspective, and I might be putting my team first, or like putting my team ahead of actually companies' interests. And ultimately, as professionals, that's not necessarily what we're being paid to do. It's kind of as a leader in the company, as an officer of the company, you're paid to look after company's best interests. And I know that sounds a bit like, whatever, Kafkaesque, or just kind of scary, but ultimately it's the reality, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. Just kind of, it's I think it's, and again, this is another thing that might come naturally to some people. But I remember finding myself at one point, and the only way I learned this lesson is when the others pointed it out. I didn't even notice it. I didn't necessarily spot it myself. But kind of, I would say things like, well, maybe that is the right thing to do, but it's going to be pretty bad for our team, and really good for this other team. And no, I need to do this to protect my team, which is nonsense. Just kind of, I obviously, in that case, maybe we need to reorganize, and I'd like the kind of, and get people set up in a different way. Maybe we need to change our priorities, we need to do things differently, all that. So I think it was a really, really big and I think this lesson, I was wrong, so it was important to learn it, just because I was wrong and kind of all that. But B, it was also just ultimately limiting my own professional development as well. And there was a specific instance where I realized this, where I was so I don't know, so proud and so happy with the way I was running my teams, that I think I don't know, I think I was alienating some of the peer teams with that. Like, it felt like a lot of, just kind of, I think there was a bit of vibe of like, bit like I've heard this from others, like, oh, Milena only thinks about her own team. She doesn't think like wider. And like, if you're not in her team, just kind of, it's not good to be kind of in the way, or kind of something like that. Which is just not a really nice reputation to have. And I was like, when I heard, I was like, oh wow, okay, this is not good. I should not be doing things in this way. And ultimately, I think it did end up slowing me down a little bit career wise. Maybe like I think I ended up getting the site leadership for Google Play in London maybe a year later, because by the time I realized that this is how this works, until like they took me at least a year to sort of fix this image, or to really to fix my behaviors in that sense, so that it's kind of, people do appreciate that. As a leader, you're just actually looking for to do the right things, the thing for the customers, to do the right things for the company, and not just take care of your own team, of the team you manage. So that was kind of my big lesson number 4. Yes, you do work for your team, and that's important. You support them, you're their link to the rest of the company and all that. But also, ultimately, you work for your company, and there are situations when you need to put your company's interests ahead of your own team's interests. And ultimately, in the long run, those two are aligned. But sometimes, kind of in the short term, kind of, you may have to kind of check the balances. Okay, last one, I promise, and then I promise I'll stop talking. I'll let you ask me some cool questions. This is one. Let me just remember how it. Right. So after 12 and a half years or so at Google, Google is just such a it's a really good company. They take really good care of us here, in multiple different ways. And I never kind of, again, because I had opportunity to work on different products, and also to grow my scope and role and career and kind of all that, it never really felt like the same job for 12 and a half years. But ultimately, it was the same company. And I've listened to these type of career journeys by other people, and I was always so jealous, even when I hear like people, okay, I've done a bit of banking, and then I've done a startup, and then I've done big tech, and then I've done this and that. And it was just so, I was like, wow, people try these different things and they learn so much along the way. I know because I know every change is learning, right? And I was kind of like, I just keep staying in this company and it's amazing because I keep growing my scope and they keep throwing opportunities at me, and that's amazing. But ultimately at some point I think you just have to also put yourself somewhere where it might not be like the most comfortable place to be. So I kind of, I think for me, kind of coming back from maternity leave, what that was a big clicking point where I was kind of like, okay, I did set up my team. They're in good place. They actually managed to operate reasonably well without me for 6 months. I came back. I did like a big reorg to just fix a few more things, and then I was like, I think the team can go on without me, which is even it was incredibly vain point to think that they would ever not be able to. But it is one of those things. If you stay at a place for a very long time, it's kind of like the kind of things you think like, oh wow, how is this going to work? It's kind of but also I realized like, hey, I actually, even if I'm advancing on the career ladder, I feel I'm just not learning as much because I just know Google inside out. I know how everything works. I can see that with that next promotion, like I like there might be like 10% more learning, but like for the majority, I'll just be kind of doing more of the same. I'll be running maybe a larger org, but like the core of the stuff is still going to be the same. So that kind of like I forced myself to go around to look for like what else could get me excited to go around to explore new opportunities, new roles. Was not an easy decision to leave at all. I didn't have like a big reason or anything that wasn't working for me at Google. Far from it. But I did feel like I wanted something quite different. Like I wanted a smaller company. I wanted maybe more kind of GM style, like more executive type role, so I can get exposure to more of the business. I feel at Google we're quite sheltered from quite a lot of those business realities of kind of what it takes to run a company and kind of how that looks. So that's why kind of I decided to accept this role as a CTO at Trainline. So starting next Monday, please wish me luck, everyone. I kind of I'm a little bit nervous how it's going to go after all these years. But I do know I don't even know exactly what succeeding or failing in that new role would mean. Like I'm certainly not going to get promoted. It's the most senior tech job in the company, so I just need to do it well. But regardless of how it goes, I know I'm going to learn a ton. I can tell that already. And ultimately, for me, that was the decision. The decision was to prioritize learning ahead of further, climbing the ladder or even, making more money or anything like that. Because I think ultimately, in the long run, all that knowledge and skill and kind of learning is what really stays with you, and what I think also kind of pays off in the end, but also feels more and more satisfying. So in that sense, my latest lesson, or my lesson number 5, was to prioritize learning, just ahead of ladder claiming or money making or something like that. So with all that, just to remind you very quickly what we spoke about. So you don't know what you like, try out different things. Engineering management is a different job to software engineering. So just realizing really what your job is in each one of these. Growing resilience, incredibly important. It's been an absolute core skill for me professionally. Then you kind of, as a leader, you work for your team, but you also still work for your company. And very often or not often, occasionally you need to prioritize company ahead of what maybe your team needs at that time. And then prioritizing learning. And kind of with all that, again, I'm going to caveat it with, keep in mind we all have different journeys. Some of these like may not be relevant for you at all, but I do hope some of them have been useful. So with that, I'm going to open for questions if anyone has any.
I think we've got a question in the chat already from Carolina. Can you see the chat?
I don't. Oh, wait. Give me a second. Sorry, I don't use Zoom day to day. We use something else at Google, but I do need to get used to it because the new company uses it. No, I absolutely have no clue where. Oh, sorry, chat. Yes, I see it. I see it now. Okay.
Yeah.
Milena, great perspective on transitioning to management. I still like to ask, do you feel like you've lost anything when you stopped coding and began managing full time? I'm worried about missing the creative problem solving and ability to innovate, but perhaps there's different form of problem solving in managerial positions. Excellent question. Yes, I did want to talk about this, but I think halfway I realized that I'm being a bit slow, especially in this first one. So kind of I rushed through that a little bit. So I'm not gonna lie, I didn't miss coding as much. Kind of that one I thought I missed it sometimes, but it wasn't too bad. I did miss designing quite a lot. Like I loved I think in its core somewhere I'm like a very system design kind of person. Like I love boxes and arrows and diagrams and how are we going to solve this problem with this existing architecture that we have and what needs to change, and if we're replatforming, how do we replatform this? Like that type of problems like appeal to, designing storage systems for something like that type of stuff really appeals to me. So I miss that pretty badly, and I probably I kind of tried to stay involved with that probably longer than I should have, to the point where at some point my senior leads were kind of like, hey, just back off. Like we don't need you to tell us anymore how to design this or how to build this. Like we like not quite in those words, but that's I think that's the fact. That was it was very clear that they were like, okay, you can add value in different ways now. Go, and just kind of like figure out organizational stuff or roadmap with product managers or something like that. That said, I didn't have to do that transition until much longer, probably more like I think for as long as the team was, under 30 or so, I was very still closely related with technology, in the sense that I was reading every design document, I was going to every design review, I would comment on designs pretty frequently. Sometimes we would whiteboard together on how something should be solved, and kind of all that. And that's so it's kind of, you can keep a little bit of that, again, with the caveat that your team might feel like they might not love it, like they might feel that you might be adding value better in different ways. Sometimes they can also feel a bit intimidated, in the sense that it might be hard for them to say no if you're a manager and you're pushing for a certain solution that they don't agree with, but they just struggle to say no to. So just kind of can feel a little bit awkward in the power dynamics sense. However, you can, for as long as the org is not too big, and especially if it's a single team of, let's say 10 people or so, I think you can be very involved technically, like genuinely, like understand every design, do everything, kind of all that. But to answer your question in a little, just actually a little bit more directly, creative problem solving, you will have almost no matter what the job is. I found it that what sort of filled that gap for me, that the not solving technical problems, strategy was filling up that. Like both are actually organizational structure to some level, like how should we organize into squads, and who should be leads, and how should we transition from this project to that project so that we don't lose velocity and that type of stuff. But more than that, working on strategy and roadmap and kind of stuff like that. So figuring out what to do and not just how to do it. Um, Again, we have product managers for that, product leads for that, but they really require a lot of input from engineering leads, I would say. And I don't even mean just based on, hey, this is expensive, this is cheap, this is easy to build, it's hard to build. I even mean in terms of like, hey, this is what we should be doing, and versus this is not what we should be doing. I think there is engineering leaders have so much perspective and so much value to bring in this sense. And for me, that was like, so just kind of over time, I've been channeling myself more from how to build something into what to build. And that's kind of, and that's what I'm still doing for my org in significant degree, is just shaping the strategy and the roadmaps and that type of stuff. Cool. And thank you, Sofia, for saying good luck, and Priyanka as well. And then Sofia is asking, what was the main difference in interviews for software engineering and management? Do you mean, thanks, Caroline. Do you mean the difference in the sense of when I was interviewing for the roles as a manager, or when I was conducting, maybe, because I was obviously on both sides. I was both being interviewed for some of these roles, and I was the one interviewing for her role. So just maybe a bit more perspective on in terms of what's interesting there. What would you like to know? Oh, being interviewed. Let me think. So yeah, it was different. Like so software engineers for Google in particular, it's very technical, right? Like it's four, I guess it's 5 interviews in total, out of which 2 are algorithmical problem solving and coding. One is system design, one is more culture type stuff, like Googliness and leadership is what we call it. And then I think fifth one is sometimes added, but not always. But and if it's added, then it might be again algorithmical problem solving and coding or something like that, or maybe object oriented design or something like that. For management, you end up more with, one is typically about people management, so things like performance management. If someone is not doing so well, what do you do about it? Someone is doing very well, like how do you help them, kind of continue to develop? How do you shape teams? What are the considerations? What is how to think about the culture, all that people management stuff. One is generally technical leadership. So I don't know, what were the examples of questions there? So kind of more maybe resolving conflict on the team, in the sense of like people disagree about some technical solution to something. How do you approach that? Or you have a very large project that you only have like a one sentence to describe it. How would you go about kind of doing something like that? Then system design would definitely be there for sure, even for engineering leadership for positions, for management as well. What else? uh, t- 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 this one, system design. No, it must be maybe two people management, two technical. So it also depends on the seniority of the management position. I think if it's more like a eng manager of a single team, then it would be halfway engineer, halfway management. Whereas when you're kind of more like a director level, you don't have any, like, apart from maybe system design, you don't have any coding interviews anymore. Which at this stage I'm actually grateful for, because I haven't coded in now, I don't know, 8 year, maybe like 7 years or something like that. So yeah, whereas I like to think I can still do a little bit of it, I would probably be extremely rusty, and just remembering the syntax on the whiteboard and coding would be a bit intimidating. Cool. Do we have
Any other questions?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for doing this. It's super interesting to hear your lessons and everything. I was wondering, so it sounds like you made sort of a step in your career every few years. Is that something you were very open with your managers, like something you asked for, or did it also just sort of happen organically?
Yeah, very good question. I wasn't as intentional. Like, Google has a very structured approach to this, so you're almost kind of forced to think about this. We have performance review periods every 6 months, and then kind of you have to fill that. And as part of that, there is an expectation that your manager will talk to you about how you advance and that type of stuff. I do worry, and this is like the feedback that I keep giving to our leadership, that I think it's almost, I feel there is sometimes almost too much emphasis on it. It just kind of, sometimes it's just nice to do a good job in terms of like, just, hey, I just want to, as sorry, I know this sounds horrible from a person that actually ended up benefiting from that type of system quite a lot. I do think it just kind of, there have been situations where I was just kind of like, I just want to write some good technology. I just want to build some cool, systems and products. Just this constant thinking of like, okay, am I exceeding expectations or strongly exceeding expectations? Am I just meeting expectations? Is this good enough? What does good look like? What should I be? I feel just kind of puts you a little bit in that mind frame, and I see it with people. People start obsessing like, hey, I'm being, am I moving fast enough? Am I moving too slow? Am I just, what does this mean? What is it? It's but I definitely, I must say, I benefited from that system. And then just kind of, when it's laid out in front of you in such a structured way, it's, to me, it came naturally to optimize for it. It just kind of, it was there, so I was like, okay, so you told me what I kind of need to be doing to exceed expectations, so I guess I'll do it. So then it's kind of, it wasn't as deliberate as much as I feel the system kind of led me that way. But I guess ultimately I'm also, just ambitious as a person, probably. Like, otherwise I would have, I do know people who are just like, yeah, I don't care this, I'm done with the ladder, I'm not climbing, I'm super happy where I am. Just kind of super happy to, I struggle to, I think I would struggle with that. Like, I think I go after it, but there wasn't any particular thought, especially when I was starting 10 years ago. I mean, I had no clue that, and I remember in my first year, I was just kind of like, oh, I just want to survive this first, I want to get my first change list in. I want to ship my first project. I just want to survive my first whatever, this and that. It's kind of, at that stage, I was just much more, I had no idea how things are going to go. So I was not thoughtful. I did not have any sort of 5 year plan or 10 year plan. I don't really even have one now. I must say that I'm very relieved in some sense that now I can just focus on getting job done to the best of my abilities and not have to worry about promotions or anything like that. But again, it's kind of I know it's a privilege to be at a place where I can say something like this. So that's just kind of want to be mindful of that.
Yeah, super interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Andrea says, congratulations, the process for such a position. And yeah, thanks for wishing me good luck. What was the process? Yeah, process was proper. Like it was a lot of steps. I guess I did initial screening with the CEO of the company, and then with talk to chief people officer, and all of these are kind of ultimately they are interviews, but they're framed in a more kind of two-sided ways because we're both trying to figure out if I like the company and I feel I'll be a good fit, if they feel I'll be the right fit for it. So it's a bit more conversational and kind of kind of two-sided basically. Um, but yeah, first with CEO, with chief people officer, with CFO, with chief financial officer, with chief product officer, which is my counterpart in product sense and very very important partner. um at some point also with chief business kind of commercial officer, and then there was this panel presentation where they gave me some kind of topics and questions, and I did like a presentation like this, like a 40-minute presentation, and then some questions and answers where I presented that. And then I kind of got sort of interviewed or like another set of fit calls with the people I would be managing. They're VPs and directors of engineering there who are going to be my direct reports as of next Monday. So they also got to say, and I think that's also really important because if you just come in and they've never seen you before and you're now like a new boss, I think it's a bit weird. So just actually it was quite nice to get that a bit of that time, and they got to vet me as well and probably say that, hey, it's like, yeah, this is okay, like, I'll accept this person as my boss. So yeah, I think that's how the process went. Cool.
Okay, have we got any further questions from anyone? I don't know if we've covered everything now. Well, sounds good. Well, yeah, brilliant. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge and your experience with everyone. And yeah, we'll certainly share the recording with the group afterwards. So I'm sure a lot of people will be really thrilled to hear about your experience and your tips and lessons for them. And yeah, thanks for everyone for joining, and good luck next Monday when you start a Trayline.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone. Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you.